following takes place between sometime today and tomorrow when I'm stuffing my face with fucking Thanksgiving food. Events occur in real time.
Happy holidays, people. Welcome to season 4 of my series of 24 reviews. If you guys have been following my channel, you know that I have been reviewing every season of 24 leading up to 24 Legacy in February. I've done 3. It's time to tackle number 4 today. Mild spoilers, just in case you haven't seen the other videos. I'll leave links to those below and you can check them out on my channel anytime you want. Season 4 takes place a year and a half after season 3 and things are really different. There's no David Palmer. He's not president anymore. The guy that he was running against for re-election in season 3 is now the president. John Keeler is now the president now. At CTU, things are different too. There's no Tony Almeida. There's no Jack Bauer. We'll get to them in a second. Chloe is still there, so that's pretty cool. Overarching villain for season 4 is Marwan. There's this terrorist named Marwan, and he is trying to execute a series of attacks in the United States of America for reasons that I'll get into a little bit later. He has associates, and he has a bunch of sleeper cells that are operating for him inside the country, namely the Araz family, who have some interesting stuff and some interesting family dynamics going on as they try to carry out his plan. The season is broken down basically into a series of arcs. The first arc of the season deals with an attack on Secretary of Defense James Heller and his daughter Audrey, who happens to be with him at the time when they're both kidnapped. Second arc of the season deals with Marwan using an override device that was acquired in a train accident early in the day to try to melt down a nuclear power plant, and CTU has to try to stop him from doing that. There's another attack later on in the season that has to deal with taking down Air Force One. That's right, they attack Air Force One, and not everybody walks away from that shit squeaky clean. And the last arcs of the season are kind of broken down into 2 separate arcs. I mean, there's one arc that has to deal with China and US and tension between them because Jack leads a team into their consulate to acquire a suspect, and in the process, their consul is killed. So this understandably creates some tension between China and the US. The other arc deals with CTU and Jack finding Marwan and stopping him from launching a nuclear warhead that he acquired from some kind of nuclear football thing, which apparently is a thing that I didn't know about. Right off the bat, you could tell there's something different about this season. It's not just the fact that David Palmer isn't there, although that's a pretty big reason. You realize that the guy that's put in his place, John Keeler, the guy who replaced David Palmer in this season as president, he's kind of boring. He's like insanely boring. Like, there's nothing interesting about President Keeler. There's nothing really to write home about. He's just kind of a guy. He feels like just a guy. And in the history of 24, I feel pretty confident saying that he's the most uninteresting president that we've ever had during a season of 24. As a result, that political intrigue and that political drama that we've had for the first 3 seasons is kind of missing in this season. For pretty much 16 or 17 episodes, that political intrigue is not there. David Palmer luckily does come back later on in the season as a special advisor to the vice president, but up until that point, it's kind of boring watching Keeler just sit on a plane and bark orders at people. You can also tell something's different in the fact that Jack Bauer is happy. At the beginning of this season, Jack Bauer, he's not working for CTU. Apparently Aaron Driscoll has a thing against drug addicts, so he can't work for CTU anymore. He's now working for Secretary of Defense James Heller. They're in LA for some kind of security conference thingamajigger or what to call it. And he has a relationship with Audrey Raines. He and Audrey are a thing. They're a couple. And Jack is happy. It's also weird knowing that it's going to turn to complete and utter shit in the next 24 hours. But for now, take this moment and frame it and remember it. Jack being happy and relaxed and content. Because you are not going to see that shit for at least the next 4 to 5 seasons. I mean, you might see it a little bit in season 8, but take a look at that happy, relaxed Jack, because you're not going to see that shit for a really long time. Over the course of the day, as the Secretary of Defense and Audrey are in danger and Jack kind of has to get himself worked back into the mix, you realize that Jack really doesn't want to do this anymore. He wants to kind of live his own life. He wants to get out of field work. He wants to just be a guy. You know, it's kind of like the old saying, every time I think I'm out, they drag me back in. He basically has to transform himself back into Babar. You know, the badass beyond all reason. Transforming himself back into Babar, though, causes some complications with his relationship with Audrey. Over the course of the day, Audrey sees that Jack is kind of more ruthless and brutal than she thought he was. He has to do some really bad things, some really horrible things, and it kind of compromises her opinion of him, unfortunately. Probably in the back of her mind, she's just sitting there thinking that, oh, wow, he's a really good guy, and now he's Babar. I mean, the sex was really good before, but now that he's Babar, is he gonna unintentionally try to torture this pussy? I don't know if I want those problems. Also, Audrey's ex-husband comes back into the fray, which complicates things further. Jack and Audrey are in a bit of a tight spot. They're being attacked by these guys in this building, and Jack is kind of outmaneuvered and outgunned at that point. But out of nowhere, Tony Almeida comes out of nowhere and saves them. You find out that Tony has had a bit of a rough go of things since season 3 ended. Because of the events of season 3, he had to go to prison. Luckily, Jack and former President David Palmer were able to get him out of prison. He kind of became a drunk and angry, bitter drunk, and Michelle left him, and he's kind of just been a Debbie Downer since then. This season is pretty much about a redemption arc for Tony Almeida. Tony Almeida has to kind of reprove himself again. You could tell that Tony really wants to help. You could tell that Tony really wants to serve his country. He really wants to be that guy, that Tony Almeida from the previous seasons, but it's kind of hard for him to now because he has a whole bunch of baggage. You can see Jack pushing him in the right direction, and we're rooting for Tony, and we want Tony to come back and be a big help because Tony is really good at his job, and he does end up coming back to CTU and serving as kind of like a consultant. Erin Driscoll is the head of CTU, but due to some really traumatic stuff that happens to her, she has to leave, and in comes Michelle Dessler. That's right, Michelle Dessler is back running CTU, and it understandably gets kind of awkward between her and Tony. Kind of like season 2 all over again. They kind of have to rediscover their love for each other, and they kind of have to develop this relationship again, but seeing them work through it again was pretty cool. Michelle is put into a situation very similar to Tony from the previous season. In this scenario, though, she goes left instead of going right. She chooses the good of the people over Tony, which, again, is an interesting direction to take Michelle. We also see this season that this is the official birth of the dynamic duo between Jack and Chloe. Chloe, after a certain point in this season, she officially becomes hashtag Team Bauer for life. She is the most loyal, ride or die friend that you could ever ask for. They teased it a little bit in season 3, but it's an official thing now in season 4. We also see a pretty cool relationship developing between Chloe and another guy she works with named Edgar. Edgar is a lame, he's a dork, he's kind of this chunky guy that's a little bit awkward and a little bit unsure of himself and a little bit hesitant. But next to Chloe O'Brien, he's probably the smartest person at CTU, and it's kind of fun seeing their back and forth over the course of the day and seeing how they talk to each other. They're both very awkward people, which is probably why they're very good friends by the end of this season. We get introduced to a lot of new characters in this season too. Curtis Manning, who I thought was just going to be this boring, whatever, blank slate black guy, but nah, Curtis proves his worth over the course of the season. He pretty much becomes a glorified field agent now that I think about it. Hey, 24, badass black guy. Yeah, it's good for you. Not going to touch a lot on Charles Logan. He becomes the president after President Keeler basically dies in Air Force One, even though they say he didn't die. Let's be honest, he probably died. I'm not going to say much about Charles Logan other than to say I hate his guts from the moment he steps on screen. He's such a sniveling little whiny weasel-ass bitch. I'm going to talk about him more in season 5. Just know the introduction is here, and the introduction to his character is pretty awesome. And there's some really great highlights for this season. There's an episode where Chloe actually has to go out in the field and follow up a lead on her own. She actually has to use an automatic weapon and she kills a dude, and seeing Chloe out in the field doing some Babar shit of her own is pretty cool. Jack in a building with McClellan Forrester guys where he's kicking ass left and right. He and Paul recruit 2 citizens to get into a firefight with some commandos later on, although it leads to Paul getting shot, and this also leads to one of the more tragic moments of the entire season. Jack has to basically let Paul Raines die because a suspect that he got from the Chinese consulate is dying, and he basically has to choose between saving the Chinese consulate or saving Audrey's ex-husband, and he chooses to save the suspect. Man, this is why I say Jack is like, he's such a tragic hero. His life fucking sucks. I would never want to be Jack Bauer because he's always put into these kind of impossible ass decisions, and you can understand Audrey and her feeling the way she feels because it's clear over the course of the day she still has some kind of feeling towards Paul. You also understand that Jack, he has to kind of honor the good of the many, and it outweighs the needs of Audrey. It kind of torpedoes their relationship for the foreseeable future too. And everything around Jack Bauer, it just turns to complete and utter shit, and it's just, it sucks. His life really sucks. In the end, Marwan is a pretty good villain. His plans actually work half the time, which is pretty cool. We get to see the bad guys get a couple of wins, which is awesome. It adds to the tension and the adrenaline of the show. The Araz family is cool, and it's so great to see these characters continue to develop and build. And the season ends on a cliffhanger. Jack Bauer basically has to fake his death because the Chinese are after him, and he has to fake his death and go on the run. Season 4 takes it up to an even higher level. These seasons continue to get better and better and better and better. I will say season 4 is definitely a Superman Prime type of show. that's my review of Season 4. Happy holidays. Stay tuned for Season 5 in a few weeks. If you like what you see, tell me how you feel, and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel. Peace.
This was an accident or a targeted attack.
It all comes down to one man.
I want a visual at the location.
Kiefer Sutherland in the most critically acclaimed series on television. 24.